Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on Microsoft Dynamics GP tips and tricks. Jeff Smith is actually going to be presenting today. He is one of our solution architects here at Socius. Just want to go through a few housekeeping items with everyone. Everyone is in listen-only mode, but if you do have a question, we will be answering questions throughout the webinar. And you can ask a question two ways. One, you can raise your hand and I'll unmute your line, and you can ask a question that way live, or if you'd rather just type a question in the question box, you can do that as well, and we'll go through those throughout the presentation. We are recording today's presentation, so you will be able to have access to the recording after the webinar is over. We'll send that out to everyone. So I will hand it over to Jeff now. Jeff, we'll get started on GP tips and tricks.
Thank you, Lisa, and thanks everyone for taking some time today. This session is actually a little bit of a review of a session that we did at our Aspire conference a month or two ago, but we wanted to make sure that all of our clients had an opportunity to see it. So the objectives for today are really to just show you or provide you with some tips to help you maximize the value gained from your investment in Microsoft Dynamics GP. I think most of you, like me, if you're using Excel as an example, you probably use some of the functionality but not all of it, and a lot of times there's these little nuggets of help that or functionality that would help you immensely. You just don't know they're there. So today we're hoping to show you a few things that might be of value to you. Some of them might be little shortcuts. Some of them might be modules that you can use that you're not today, etc. So certainly want to reiterate what Lisa said, that we want to make sure this is valuable to you, so feel free to ask questions as we go. So we're going to start this session off as we are right now in our introduction. I've broken the tips and tricks into 4 categories: system setup and design, business functionality, business intelligence and reporting, and then some. We also want to spend some time with some popular third-party add-ons. So if you've ever thought, man, it would be great if GP could do this, but it doesn't, that doesn't mean that it can't be done. And a lot of times there's some really good independent software vendors that have written applications to fill that niche for you. At the end, well, and I'll just say during and at the end, if you want to ask questions, I'm glad to answer them. If there's anything that we can't answer right now, we'll take notes and we'll make sure we follow back up. So I'm going to start off by going through the system setup and design functionality that we wanted to review with you. And again, focusing on saving you time, saving you effort, eliminating redundancy, providing you with additional functionality. The first thing is that we have the ability, starting with GP 2015, to actually copy homepage and area pages. So the idea is that if you add a new user, you can copy the settings for an existing user. So as an example, if you hire a new person to handle your accounts payable functions, you could, and this is a second or a fifth or 10th person that does that job, then you can actually copy all the security and the look and feel homepage settings that the other users have, saving you a significant amount of time. Also, when it comes to some time savings in regards to setup, a lot of you that are listening today probably have more than one legal entity, and that means that you have more than one database set up inside of Dynamics GP. Because of that, you have to do some work to get that database set up, and Microsoft has and the Great Plains team has supplied us with a tool called the Professional Service Tools Library, which is a number of utilities that are available. One of those utilities is what's called Company Copy. So what it allows you to do is copy data from one company to another. So it makes the new company setup easier. It helps with the development of test companies. So if any of you are using test companies, that can be a very valuable way of approaching things so that you can try out things that you may be implementing without doing them in production. And you can also copy selected data from the different modules that you may be using. So in these screenshots, you'll be able to see the different modules that are listed, and you can pick and choose what you copy, or you can just all the modules. Now, the next couple of slides that I'm going to talk about are really related to the Dynamics GP Web Client. The GP Web Client has been available since Dynamics GP 2013, so any of you that are on 2013, 15, or 16, you have access to the functionality of a web client. It takes some configuration and setup to make it work, but the idea is that individual users have the ability to access Dynamics GP via a web browser rather than the traditional client access or Citrix server or remote desktop tools that you may be using today. So it really can be very valuable for a variety of reasons. Number one, it eliminates the need for client installations. So that's a time savings for your IT team or your outsourced IT team. It provides you full Dynamics GP functionality. There are a few limitations, but in general, the web client provides you really full features of the Dynamics GP solution. It supports single sign-on, so once you've logged into your web environment, it allows you then to automatically dive right into Dynamics GP without a second user ID and password. It supports what's called GP self-service licenses, and so there are a variety of workflow tools that are available today, and we'll talk about a few of those as we go through this presentation, that are self-service. So you may have employees that enter timesheets against projects or for time and attendance purposes. You may use requisition functionality inside of Dynamics GP, or you may enter expenses against projects. And so the self-service license is for those users who really only need the ability to do those functions, and otherwise they wouldn't use GP at all. And so we're going to talk a little bit about workflow. If you're not familiar with it, we think it's something you need to evaluate for your organization. At least understand what it does and see if it can provide you with controls that can be valuable for the organization. And then lastly, one thing to take note of, depending on what version of the GP you're on, you're going to have with GP 2013, GP 2015, you're going to have a web client that is using a tool called Silverlight. Microsoft is sunsetting the Silverlight solution, and I'm not sure if it's going to be supported any longer, and they've replaced it with HTML5. And that HTML5 is going to provide you with some significant value as you use the web client. This window that you're looking at here is your first login window to Dynamics GP. And then this is really what the user experience is going to be like. You'll notice down the side you have your home, and then you can have the ability to access financial, sales, purchasing. So that kind of thing should be very similar to what you're used to using. This is an example of a transaction entry window for a journal entry. And while the screen might be slightly different than what you're used to, it is pretty much the same. So you will have full functionality inside of Dynamics GP. And then this is maybe a closer look at the home page. So if any of you are using the Business Analyzer, if you're using the To-Do section, if you have favorite reports, all of that functionality that you're used to seeing on your home page will also be available there. And then if you click on any of the individual module series, it will take you to those area pages where all of the menu scheme exists. One thing that will be slightly different is you will no longer have the menu bar across the top. It'll all be down the side. Okay, so really where we see this being extremely valuable is for individuals that may travel. You may have a tablet. You may have an iPad, etc. The nice thing about the latest version, GP 2016's web client, is that it's cross-platform. So you're not restricted to having a Windows environment. You can also run on an iPad or an Android device and be able to access GP. In those situations, what we typically see, if it's more of a situation where you might want to see business analytics or enter expense reports on the road or enter a requisition because you need materials, then that's probably a primary use that you would have if you're using an iPad or an Android tablet. But I do want to emphasize to you that you can use the web client in a normal office environment as well, and you have complete and full functionality. So the next thing I wanted to talk about, and I'm going to bring all of this up, is you've probably heard a lot of talk about the cloud. Microsoft provides a cloud environment that they call Azure. You've seen commercials during sporting events and other big events where they talk about the Microsoft cloud and the advantages that it brings. And also Socius provides a cloud environment as well. And we feel that it is worth investigating for a variety of reasons. Some of those reasons might be greater reliability in regards to its off-premise. The data center has automatic redundancy, internet capabilities, 24/7 by 365 monitoring and resolution. The other thing that's really important is you think of it from a organizational perspective. If you have a small team, if you don't have your own IT team, then a lot of the requirements for a network environment that you might have in-house are eliminated by using the cloud environment. So we feel like we're going to meet all of your data compliance requirements. You'll have a very reliable, robust system, while still having the flexibility of using the proper version of Dynamics GP, using the modules and the functionality, getting the reporting that you need as well. So we think it's very important for you to use or think about the movement to the cloud as well as using Office 365. Okay, so we're going to continue down the path, and I'm going to actually reiterate some of this in a little bit as well. But one of the things that's been a very important part of Dynamics GP over the last several revisions is the release of workflow functionality. Some of you on the call actually may have used Dynamics GP prior to 2013 R2 and used what's called the Business Portal. The Business Portal provided some workflow functionality leveraging SharePoint and its workflow engine for things like requisitions and time and expenses. But now that functionality has been moved to inside of the Dynamics GP application. And over the last several versions, there's been improvements to the workflow functionality and also an increased number of different workflows that are available. So the list that you see here on the window starts with the original ones, which is requisitions and purchase orders. But you can also see we have a vendor onboarding. So if you have a control process in place to add new vendors, and make sure you want to control that before you start entering invoices and paying them, then you can actually do that. With version GP 2015 R2, there was a release of vendor invoice approval process. So you actually have the ability to scan an invoice into your system, enter the payable, and then send it through a workflow process. That workflow process can be based on dollar amounts. It can be based on individuals that need to do the approving, et cetera, et cetera. So ultimately, that does give you pretty distinct possibilities. The other thing is that if you scan those, there's some licensing considerations, but many of the approval functionality options revolve around being able to approve through email and actually have the scanned invoice attached to the email. So there's really no additional cost for licensing if the individuals never go inside of GP. We also have some batch approvals, and then if you're using project and then timesheets and expense reports, there's also a time and attendance or timesheet functionality there, as well as HR self-service, which I'll talk about a little bit more as we go through this presentation. Workflow is really something that you might want to consider in building controls and eliminating potentially paper approval sheets that you may use internally or emails. This keeps it organized. It keeps it inside the system. Also, it'll have an audit trail tracking of each individual request and the approval process, so there's a level of accountability. I think we have a question.
We do. Does the workflow work with DocuSign?
This is actually internal workflow process inside. It would work with a document management solution from the perspective of if you were to attach a scanned document inside. So GP allows you to actually have some scanning functionality that will put it right into GP, or you can take for instance, a PDF file or some other type of document format, electronic document format, attach it to the transaction and pass it through. Hopefully that answers your question.
Thanks, Jeff.
So keep moving on. Some business functionality that I wanted to talk about is we have the ability to actually copy journal entries and paste them into from Excel and copy them into your general ledger as a transaction. So this is actually a very quick and easy way to get those transactions from a spreadsheet without rekeying them. So you'll notice at the top of the menu bar here, over on the left, in this example, I have a spreadsheet. I simply did a control copy, control C. I hit the paste button here and it drops the transaction directly in. So now, for now, this really only applies to journal entries inside of Dynamics GP. Another tool that we wanted to make sure you were aware of is Analytical Accounting. Analytical Accounting really allows you to do several things, but one of them that's really important is reporting on items that you may have, like projects or a certain initiative that you're working on. We've seen people track grants in here and using Analytical Accounting. And it allows you to keep your chart of accounts under control, because a lot of times in the past people would build a segment for those types of dimensions. So you can create a transaction dimension, you can affiliate these dimensions with your chart of accounts. So if, an example might be, we had an organization we worked with that wanted to track their different marketing initiatives, but they didn't want to have 27 different marketing accounts in their chart of accounts. And so they didn't want to have different segments for each initiative, so they built in Analytical Accounting dimensions for this purpose. So then they could maintain one marketing expense, and then the system would then prompt them for the individual initiative, whether it be an email blast, whether it be a trade show, whatever it is, and so they could track all of those initiatives in detail without having to explode their chart of accounts.
We do have another question. This may be back from your other slide, previous slide, but what versions support the copy-paste functionality into the GL?
That started, I believe, with GP 2013.
Cool.
There's been a lot of interest in the copy-paste functionality, I can tell you. So, okay. So the next thing that I wanted to talk about is reconciling to your general ledger. A lot of people don't know that this tool exists, but there is a function that's a part of the utilities in general ledger that's called Reconcile to GL. And what it allows you to do, and it's been in the system for several revisions, I think maybe even starting with 2010, could be prior to that, I don't remember exactly. But the idea is that at first it included just payables and receivables. But what now it includes is also bank reconciliation and inventory. So what it does is it provides a spreadsheet view of all of your reconciling items. And by the way, for any of you interested, bank reconciliation and inventory became part of this in GP 2013. So what happens is that on this window you fill in the module that you'd like to reconcile, the date range that you'd like to reconcile, and then basically where you want to send it in Excel. You'll then get a worksheet that will show you all of the matched transactions in that period and any unmatched transactions in that period, so that you can actually get a look and see where there might be a disconnect. So if something actually was posted in payables but didn't post through general ledger, or a posting was interrupted, or something happened, or a batch got deleted in general ledger, you'd be able to see that and be able to know where the inconsistency exists. Just helping streamline that process. So I wanted to take that a step further, though. There are other reports that are inside the system that help you reconcile, and oftentimes these will be your first line of defense, and then that reconcile utility would be kind of the follow-up to that. So you don't need to go through a lot of toil if you are in balance. So inside of Dynamics GP, there are a number of subledger reports that will help with this initiative. So for instance, we have a historical received not invoiced report. So when you issue a purchase order, receive the goods but haven't gotten the invoice, there's going to be an accrued payable transaction. And so this will actually allow you to reconcile that. That report actually started with GP 2015 R2, and it is a SQL reporting services report. Also, many of you probably already use the historical age trial balance for payables and receivables management. So this report allows you to print your aging as of a certain date, and that report then should tie out to the general ledger as of that ending date as well. There's now fixed asset to general ledger reconciliation functionality in the fixed asset module if you're using that. And then lastly, there are reports in the inventory module to allow you to reconcile as well. The most effective one in inventory is what's called the historical inventory trial balance. There's also a historical stock status report. That report has some flaws in its design, and so usually the historical inventory trial balance is going to be a better choice for you. Okay, so while we're talking about reconciliation, one of the things that I think is important is there are certain controlling accounts in the system that you're not going to want to have journal entries entered to. I'll give you a couple examples. Accounts payable, accounts receivable, cash, inventory. So we actually have the ability when we set up an account in the chart of accounts to determine whether we allow account entry to it or not. Because oftentimes things for cash or accounts payable or accounts receivable or inventory should flow through the subledgers and should not be required to go through the general ledger as a journal entry. So just keep that in mind. This is a control. It can be on an account-by-account basis as you decide is appropriate. Okay, so we'll keep moving on in regards to some financial functionality. First of all, we have a number of our clients that we talk to that say, hey, I need an ability to take something like prepaid insurance or contract revenue, and I need to be able to spread that revenue across a contract period, as an example. And right now, they're doing a manual journal entry on a monthly basis to move deferred revenue to actually recognized revenue. And so you actually have the ability to set that up in a tool called Revenue and Expense Deferrals. This is just one window that is kind of where you define the profiles of these. And then as you enter these types of transactions, you'll be able to assign a deferral profile. It works with general ledger journal entries. It works through receivables management, payables management, sales order processing, invoicing, and also purchase order processing. So this automates that process of the automated journal entries across a period of time to recognize revenue or expenses. There's different spread methods that you can use, so I can make it based upon the number of days in a month, or I can do it in equal amounts. So like I said, I think contract revenue and prepaid expenses are the most common uses of this. You may have some other examples where you'd like to use this functionality as well. All right. So one of the things that I think sometimes is an issue is just knowing when transactions flow through the system, who posted them, who is responsible for them. And this becomes more and more important as you have a larger number of people that participate in the process within your system. And so one of the little quick hints we wanted to provide you is for you to know that you have the ability to include, and I just use an example of a smart list, this could be used in other reporting as well. You can find out who, what, and when, so you can determine who posted those transactions, when they posted them, what the individual transactions were. So in this example, I put together a quick smart list that shows journal entries, the date, the accounts that were affected, and then the debit and credit amount, as well as who posted them. So this gives you some sense of, you know, basically as every transaction goes through the system, a user ID is assigned to those transactions, and so this gives you some ability to track who posted those transactions. All right. A couple other things that some of our clients have gained great value from is using tools like SafePay. Oh, okay. I think we have a question.
So on the expense deferral piece, where is the expense deferral option in GP?
It is, I always forget, it's, there's part of it is under setup, under financial. And then I think that's the main setup area. And then that screen then allows you to pick the types of transactions. Once that's done, there's some additional functionality that will actually show up as on the additional tab on some of the transaction windows. So you'll be able to pick a profile based upon the profiles you've assigned in your setup.
And then we have another one. Exactly how do you get expense deferral? And I'm guessing that might be the same question.
How do you get it?
Yeah, it says how do we get to this? So same question I think that was just asked by someone else.
Right. And by the way, if either of you have trouble finding that once you're in your system, then you know we can assist with that if you need to talk to someone on our support team. Any other questions? Okay. So like I was just starting to say is there are tools that help. There's a tool that actually helps us prevent fraud. So we actually have the ability to use what's called SafePay. And you may know it more commonly as what's called Positive Pay. It is part of the e-banking suite inside of Dynamics GP. And for any of you that are on GP 2013 or later, it actually is included in your software. So you own this piece of software, you just may not know it. And so it's just a matter of getting coordinated with your bank in regards to what the data file needs to look like. We help design that, and then you can send the file to the bank recording all the payments you've made. They will then alert you if payments come back to them to clear that don't exist in these lists of transactions that you send to them. So it really gives you a heads up in regards to making, well, I guess it just allows you to make sure more confidently that you're preventing fraud and people misappropriating your funds. Another electronic banking suite option is what's called Electronic Bank Reconcile. This actually is also a tool that we can set up coordination with your bank. They have the bank can then send you on a frequency of daily, weekly, monthly, however often you choose, and it will automatically then clear the transactions through your bank rec module rather than you have to go in and check each one on the list. So it really then saves you time and allows your folks to get through that process a little more easily. This actually can be quite a time savings for individual organizations that have a good number of bank accounts where they have high-level activity.
There's a question about how do you do the prepaid automatic? That might have been from previous.
Prepaid automatic. I'm not sure I understand the nature of the question. If you could elaborate, then I will try to answer that question. Are we still talking about revenue and expense deferrals?
She just said okay. Hold on. We can come back to it.
We'll come back to that question. Please make sure you help me understand so I can answer it correctly. All right. So for any of you that are using payables, purchase order, and those two modules, they're added in 2015 Release 2. There was a purchasing all-in-one view. This window actually allows you to see the different types of transactions. So you can actually see a purchase order. You can see accompanying receipts against the purchase order. You can see invoices that then apply. You can see payments to the vendor that apply and any returns that apply. So I can get a list of all of my transactions. I can highlight a purchase order, and then it will show me all of the corresponding transactions that apply to it. So it really is, and it's accessible from a number of different places. You can see it in vendor maintenance on your menu bar and other purchasing inquiry windows if you do a vendor inquiry. And also there's a navigation list for it as well. So this, like I said, is new in GP 2015 Release 2. Any of you that have already moved on to GP 2016, then there's also a similar inventory and sales all-in-one document. So on the sales side, what that's going to provide you is sales orders. It's going to then provide you with invoices that apply with those and cash receipts that apply to those. On the inventory side, what it's going to allow us to do is select an inventory item and then see all ins, outs, and transfers of inventory that you might want to see.
We have clarification now.
Okay.
Okay, so it said, you said there is a way that the prepaid can be set up or set to automatically create a journal entry of when it should be expensed. I'd like to know how to do that because we currently do it on an external Excel file.
Okay, so if we can, I can get more specific and show windows and things like that, but we would probably need to do that offline. Okay. So if I could get a name and an email address, we can coordinate a time to do that.
Perfect. I have that too, so
okay.
Joanna, we'll get with you.
Okay. So as we continue, any of you using accounts payable in the group probably, and this maybe is a bold statement, but I bet everyone has at least one duplicate vendor in their vendor base. And if not, I bet you there's people in the group that have started off with a numbering scheme for their vendors and then decided I'd rather do it a different way. So now the Dynamics GP solution includes in its utilities a tool called Vendor Modifier and Combiner. The modifier allows us to actually modify a vendor's ID, and then actually that vendor ID modification will roll into all of the open and closed transactions that exist for that vendor. So it will then show all of those transactions as if they were always the new vendor ID. The combiner then allows us to say, you know what, I have two different vendors but they're really the same vendor. So when they got added a second time because somebody didn't see the first one, and now we got transactions against both of them. And what that allows us to do is then merge those two together, so we can say vendor A and vendor B should be vendor A, and it will automatically combine all their historical data so that you can get a better picture of all of the activity on a consolidated basis. So this is actually included in your Dynamics GP licensing, and it is in the utilities section of your payables management module. All right, so I alluded to this earlier, but on the topic of payables transaction approval workflow, we actually have the ability, and I think this is all, everyone should at least take a look and see if this makes sense for them. We have the ability to define a workflow for single payables transactions so that we actually can send, we can enter a payables transaction, and like I said earlier, we could attach a document, either scanned or an electronic file, and we can then send those out for an approval workflow. So a lot of times what we see in organizations that we work with is that an invoice comes in and then a manager has to approve it. Or a manager has to approve it, but if it's over a certain dollar limit, then maybe a vice president has to approve it as well. GP now allows you to set rules in the workflow setup that will allow you to take advantage of that kind of structure. And then if I'm an approver, I can be a GP user and approve it within GP, or I can actually make approvals via my email. If I do it via email, there's no additional Microsoft Dynamics GP licensing required. Along with that, and I didn't include a slide for this, there's also requisition approval and purchase order approval that are related to the whole vendor relationship side of the business, so that you can actually enter people in your organization can enter requisitions. Those requisitions can go through a workflow approval. They can then automatically be turned into a purchase order. So there's also a purchase order approval. So you really have a number of different places where you can put controls in to make sure that you're getting a better view of your spending, and you're making sure that somebody's taking a look proactively before a vendor gets paid.
Okay, I think we have another question, or a couple actually. Is workflow available to everyone? This customer's on GP 2015. Is it something that is on the basic version or package, or do they need to purchase it?
Workflow, that's a great question. Thank you. I should have been more clear on that. Workflow exists in the base product. So workflow exists and most heavily on the vendor side for payables batches, payables invoices, requisitions, purchase orders, and vendor onboarding. But it also exists for project, for time and expense entry. It also exists in general ledger for batch approvals and receivables for batch approvals, as well as I think there's a timesheet approval for payroll. All of those exist in the basic product.
And does it depend on the version?
It does depend on the version. So in version 2013, R2 is where we had purchase orders, we had requisitions, and we had purchase orders, requisitions, and time against a project. In version 2015, we added batch approvals. We also added project expenses. And then with 2015 R2, we added payables, invoice, transaction approval. So it does matter. And if I wasn't clear on that, or if I missed something, let's just make sure we coordinate before you put something in place.
We do have another question. AP approval by email, can it be by batch or individual level?
That's a good question. We've been asked that several times. As of right now, it is an individual approval process. Okay. Good questions. So the next thing I wanted to cover was on the receivable side of the house. Many of you probably have are using receivables and maybe using that in coordination with sales order processing. If any of you have clients or customers that have so you invoice a customer and their parent company pays the invoices for them, or you invoice a customer and you send a statement to their parent, then we can create that relationship using what's called national accounts. So what it allows us to do, and an example might be, I'll use the example, if I sold to Walmart and they have thousands of stores, each one of those stores could be a customer that I could bill, but yet corporate Walmart might be the one that pays the bill, might be the one where we actually send a consolidated statement so they know what's outstanding. So if you're using national accounts, on the customer maintenance window, there is a place where you enter the customer and then their parent. On the cash receipts entry window, you can apply based upon an individual customer or a national account. And then on the statement side, and I have these highlighted on these windows, but on the statement side, you can actually include either child statements or parent statements.
Okay, we have another question. Can customers be modified and combined like AP vendors?
Yes, and it's in the same place. It is in the utilities section. There's a customer modifier and a customer combiner. That's it. Mm-hmm. Okay, another thing, and this has been functionality that's existed in GP forever, and some of these things we're talking about are new functions. Some of these are just functions that have been there forever, but you may not know they're there. So you can do write-offs on the fly. Now this is an issue where you want to decide whether you control it or not, but you can actually, when someone underpays you, so say for instance you have an invoice that is for $107, $7 of that is for sales tax, $100 is for the product, and you bill them and have the customer set up as taxable, that $7 actually is for sales tax, and then you find out that they're tax exempt, they pay you $100, then on your cash receipts window you have the ability to do a write-off of $7 right on the fly. So it's just a quick and easy way to do a write-off. It will then automatically do a credit for the $7 in that example, and make sure that your accounting's balanced, that transaction is closed out, and you move on your way. So there's a more traditional entry window for write-offs as well, and you have the ability to set up what limits are, for instance, on what write-offs are and who can do write-offs. So the next thing I wanted to cover is what's called customer vendor consolidation. If you have relationships in which you sell to a company, but they also sell to you, what this allows you to do is it allows you to set up a relationship between the vendor and the customer so that you can more efficiently manage that relationship. So it really allows you to net out what they owe you and what you owe them, and it does the accounting behind the scenes on that as well. So there are some setup windows for this, but it can be a real time saver in regards to your ongoing business with them.
And we do have another question, and this might be related to your previous slide. Can you enter credit memos in GP? And if so, how do you do it?
You can enter credit memos in GP, and there's a couple different ways. Number one, in the transaction entry window in receivables, there's a transaction type, so invoice is one of them, but credit memo is another one. Also, in sales order processing, you may be doing a credit memo because you're returning product, and if that's the case, you can do a return transaction, and that will create a credit memo for you as well. So those two ways are probably the simplest ways of creating credits for a customer.
Okay, good.
Okay, good questions today. So the next piece of hint here is customer scheduled payments. You may have made arrangements with an individual customer that you're going to invoice them for $3,000, but you're going to require that they pay that in 3 monthly payments. In which case, you can set it up so that there's a schedule. So you can see that there's a window here that says receivable scheduled payment, and that's where you can set up the number of payments, how often they're spread out, also then what your amortization schedule is, and then it will also then break that down in essence into 3 different invoices in my example, so that you age the receivable based upon that schedule rather than the whole invoice being considered late if the first payment's not made. There's also functionality that if somehow you accidentally applied a payment against an invoice and moved it to history and then realized you applied it to the wrong invoice, you have the ability in the Professional Service Tools library to do a transaction unapply. And we have the ability to do that even if discounts and write-offs are associated. So then what it does is it replaces history removal and rekeying. It basically moves that transaction back into your open receivables. So this can be really handy because otherwise there's a lot of accounting work behind the scenes that needs to get done. So, and I guess I just wanted to say in regards to the Professional Service Tools library, there are a number of utilities. I'm highlighting a few that are probably most commonly needed. The Professional Service Tools library is free. All you have to do is download it if you don't already have it loaded. And some of these tools may never apply to you, but some of them may. And certainly want to make sure that you know they have it.
And sometimes there are some issues getting the download, so if anyone has issues getting the download of the professional tools, just let your account manager know and we can help you with that.
Okay, so for any of you using HR and payroll, we just want to make sure that you know that the Affordable Care Act compliance is built into Dynamics GP. So you may know that this is for all businesses with 50 or more full-time equivalent employees. They have to provide health insurance for its full-time employees. So this functionality has been added to Dynamics GP payroll and HR over the last couple years. It allows you to then create the 1095 and 1094 forms. And then the other thing I wanted to point out here is this is the functionality in Dynamics GP is not monitoring. It's basically you have to assign the employee and then it will provide the forms. There are tools that are more comprehensive from companies like Integrity Data and Green Shades. And so if this is a big issue for you and you need to monitor throughout the year, then certainly feel free to look into those 2 options. And if you have questions, let us know and we'll help you. Also, with the release of Dynamics GP 2015 R2, the HR self-service tools provide you with a number of different functions. So as an example, an employee can go in and update their dependents. They can update their address. They also, with 2015 R2, now have the ability to view their W-2 and their pay stub. So this actually then will allow employees using GP to look at this. And you're thinking, well, I don't want all of my employees in GP. Well, this is where we can leverage the self-service licenses that are available. And those self-service licenses are really inexpensive and therefore make this more practical. I will say, again, there are other tools available for this service as well, but this is GP's offering. And so you can definitely leverage it if you're using HR and payroll. And lastly, on the HR and payroll side, there's now also an external time management app that's available. This app allows your staff to enter vacation and sick time in payroll or time off against benefit time codes in HR. And this app is actually available on Windows 8 and 10, iOS, iPad devices, and Android tablets. And this became available in GP 2015 R2. So these last few items that we've discussed have been all wrapped around HR and payroll. So if you're using those modules, at least take into consideration that functionality. All right, so we're going to move on to inventory now. Inventory, actually, I have a couple items here. One is you have the ability to assign a particular segment in your general ledger chart of accounts to a warehouse. And so this does then allow you to automatically distribute cost of goods sold or sales or things like that based upon this segment code on the site. So this saves time and effort. I'm going to talk about in a little bit a tool called Flexicoder that gives you some flexibility around this as well. The last thing I wanted to talk about in inventory is what's called landed cost. So what landed cost allows me to do is calculate the true cost of my inventory. And if you're wondering what does true cost of inventory mean, what I'm talking about is you may buy widgets and you buy those widgets at $10 each, but it may cost you $2 to get per unit to get them shipped to your location so that you can warehouse them and then sell them to your customers. So what is the true cost of that item? Is it $10 or is it really $12? What landed cost allows you to do is build the cost in, allows you to build as additional handling or shipping or tariff costs into the cost of your inventory. That then can trickle into your sales operations in regards to if you want to maintain certain margins. Those margins can be maintained on that higher cost rather than just the unit cost. All right, I'm going to switch gears into what I'll call BI. That's our term for it, but business intelligence and reporting. These are probably overused terms, but I think the thing I want you to understand is that Dynamics GP will provide you with a variety of tools that allow you to view your data the way you need to so that you can make good business decisions. So Business Analyzer allows us to organize SQL reporting services and management reporter reports into dashboards. And you can access this in a variety of ways. So some of your users may need to have that data, but they're also GP users. So we have the ability to embed the Business Analyzer windows right into your home page in GP. Other people may just want to see it on their desktop, and then other people may travel and want to be able to see it on a tablet. And so you can actually, there's a Business Analyzer app that's available for iPad and Android. And it isn't on an iPhone. It's only an iPad and Android and Windows platforms. But it provides dashboards using SQL reporting services and management reporter reports. Another, and that's built into your system. Another tool that's built into your system is Excel reports and dashboards. So there are over 250 SQL reporting services reports built in. Some are graphical, some are tabular, there's a variety of them. But there's also in excess of 200 Excel refreshable reports as well. So these reports actually are, this is an example of a dashboard in Excel. This is an example where you can really leverage Office 365. So I have an example where I have my iPhone and I can view that graph on my iPhone using Office 365 and Excel. So we want to make sure that this kind of information is available to you as in whatever form you need to have it. So SQL reporting services beyond the Business Analyzer, you can see that we have these 250 reports. The nice thing about this is that it can be surfaced in GP, but you can also get it via the web. So these reports can be available to you via web, and you can see them as dashboards, you can see them as tables. One thing I like about these reports is like an aging report, it's very easy in SQL reporting services to print an aging report, see it on the window, and then export it to Excel. And I don't know if any of you that are listening have ever had an auditor ask you for an aging or a GL trial balance in Excel, but this makes it real easy to get that data out there. Another really hardly ever used tool that can be very valuable is what's called cash flow management. This is a tool actually built into your software. So if you're on 2010, 2013, 2015, 2016, this is included. It interfaces with payables, purchase orders, receivables, and sales orders. And what it allows you to do is it allows you to create a calendar that will show you inflow and outflow. So on the receivable side, you can use average days to pay or due dates. On the payable side, you use due dates. Then the other thing that it does is it allows you to look at purchase orders, and it looks at vendor payment terms and expected delivery dates, etc., to determine those outflows, as well as doing the same thing on the sales order side. So then you can drill down and see what those transactions are, as well as one last thing is you have the ability to enter cash flow transactions. So if there's a transaction that hasn't been entered into the system, but you know it's going to affect cash and you know when, you can actually enter a transaction like that as well. And then lastly, on these reportings, I'd like to just kind of point out that there's cross-reference reports. So if you need journal entry reports, source document reports, audit trail reports, because a lot of times you may be trying to isolate something specifically that came from a certain subledger in your system, these reports will provide you with a good deal of information, and they're very easy to get right inside of Dynamics GP. Navigation lists are another way of looking at your reports, and also they interface nicely with the business analyzer that we talked about, so you can see graphs over here on the side. This is nice in regards to you can select vendor 1 and vendor 99, none of them in between, and then you can print an aging and it'll show just those vendors. So these are kind of nice examples of how we can use navigation lists more effectively. So the navigation lists, you can find them right off of your, up in the top left-hand corner here, and this will give you a list of all your reports. Yeah.
We do have a question. We have a couple actually.
Okay.
I think this one may be back to cash flow. What version is cash flow available?
All of them.
And then cross-reference, is it available in all versions?
Yes. Okay, so now I'm going to go outside of GP to talk about a reporting tool called Power BI. So, and by the way, we're running a little close to our time, so I'm going to try to hurry through, but I will answer any questions, and we'll stick around for a few minutes afterwards. So what Power BI does is it is a cloud-based tool that allows you to surface data from multiple sources, including Dynamics GP. And what I like about this is it can be predictive, in regards that you can almost be forecasting. You can interact with the tool as well. And there are two versions. This is a Microsoft tool, but you can see that it's very graphical. So I can do a map view. I can do a variety of, like this is what's called a donut chart. We can do bar charts. We can do pie charts, whatever it may be. But I can interact. So I could select a specific customer here, and it would completely redraw, or in this case, vendor. It would totally redraw this view, so that I can analyze and I can interact real quickly and get the information that I need. There, like I said, there's two versions of Power BI. There is a free version. It's called Power BI Desktop. There's also then a higher level version that's called Power BI. I don't remember the extension on it, but it's $9.99 per user per month. So it's a subscription-based tool. And like I said, I think some of the beauty of this is the ability to interact with multiple sources. So we've seen people interact with their point-of-sale systems, GP, weather data off the web. There's all kinds of different things that you can do in regards to really leveraging this, and it's a very low-cost tool. Lastly, Socius has actually developed what we call Socius Analytics, which we can provide 3 months at no charge that you can try it out, but it has some very nice dashboards that are already pre-configured for you. After those 3 months, then it will be charged on a per user per month basis.
And it's actually called a Power BI Pro Plus, is what that $9.99 user is.
Okay, thank you. Now I'm going to jump into some third parties.
Oh wait, before you do, we have a question. Does Power BI require cloud-based Dynamics GP?
No. Good question, but no, it doesn't. It can work with either cloud-based or regular on-premise software. So there's a couple tools that we feel, and we've got good relationships with several of these organizations, and they're just really nice tools. We have a tool called Smart View. It really is a more robust smart list. There's some things it does that I think are pretty awesome. First of all, it subtotals automatically. So it will, when you create your smart list, it will automatically subtotal based on things. You'll notice down the side here, we can pick and choose what fields we want on automatically. It's a little simpler. The other thing that I think is the best about this is that it can actually be inside of GP, or there's a desktop version of it too. So if you have someone who wants to do Smart List but doesn't use GP, you can actually have the external option as this as well. So you can create Smart List reports outside of GP. Also, and that was by E1 Solutions. Yes?
What versions are Smart Viewed offered in?
I don't remember exactly when it started, but I would say if you're on 13, 15, or 16, you're safe. It may even be 2010, but I'm not positive on 2010.
We'll check.
Yeah. So the next tool is Extender. So Extender is a tool that allows us to create our own customized windows, or forms, or actually lookups or menus. But what's nice about this is that you can then attach those windows to specific GP windows. So it allows you to collect additional data. So if you've ever wanted additional user-defined fields, this allows you to do it. And those user-defined fields can be lookups, they can be lists that you define, and it can be dates or strings or whatever you decide you need it to be. And then that data can also transfer along the process. So if it's attached to a vendor, then that can be viewable in the vendor maintenance window, but also on a purchase order entry window and a receivings entry window. So those types of things make it really nice. Flexicoder, this is the tool I was talking about a little earlier. So when you enter a transaction, you may want to say that I want a certain segment of my chart of accounts hit when this salesperson sells something, or when we're in this sales territory, et cetera, et cetera. So this just allows you to add some additional functionality, so from a sales perspective, it can automatically be coded properly without you having to intercede in the distribution windows. I'm going to switch over to Rockton software. Rockton actually provides us with two tools that I think are really useful. One of them is called Smart Fill, and this basically allows you to have lookup functionality beyond what's normal inside a GP. So when I'm on my account maintenance window, I can type in accounts, and it will then bring me a list of all the accounts in the chart of accounts that start with accounts. If I'm on the customer window and I type in Chicago, it'll bring me a list of all the customers in Chicago. So it's really kind of a Google search inside of GP. I'm sorry, I'm a Microsoft guy. I should have said Bing search. And then they also have an auditor, which basically allows you to do better tracking of activity against certain records in your system. So if you, I'll give you an example. We had a client that was having problems because someone in their organization kept changing the payment terms on a customer, and it ended up they were able to track transaction by transaction who was doing it, and it ended up being one of the rookie salespeople, and they actually were able to then set her straight because it was something that she didn't know better. And so it was a training opportunity, but allowed them to isolate the problem more quickly. SalesPad, many of you may use this, but this is actually a tool that sits on top of sales order processing. So it gives you, on one window, gives you access to customer order, prior order and invoice, open invoice, item data, so what have they been buying, and also provides you with workflow functionality. So as the transaction moves from one step to the next, it can move it to a different batch in the sales order processing module, so that you can then track how many transactions do I have that are ready to be picked, how many are ready to be packed, how many are in shipping, how many have been shipped, etc. The other thing that's nice is there are mobile options for this as well, so you can enter sales orders via an iPad or an Android device, and then what it'll let you do is automatically sync it back to Dynamics GP in the sales pad back at the office. So if you don't have connection, there is a disconnected mode. Also, it has some things like matrix inventory, so if you sell certain items that are small, medium, large, red, green, blue, etc., it can do that. Plus, there are really nice promotional and specialty pricing. And then lastly, collection management. What this allows us to do is manage our receivables process more effectively. The main things I wanted to talk about here is it allows you to track all of the interactions you have on a collection process. You can also define for different customers collection plans. So you may categorize your customers into high risk, good customer, big customer, whatever it may be, and then you can create different collection plans based upon their status with you. You can also then provide a collector task list each day so they can log in and track what calls they need to make today. It also automates the process of sending collection letters, and those can be customized based upon the aging bracket or a variety of different selection options that you have. So all of those tools we feel can provide great value, and really, you know, they're an addition. The third-party add-ons are an additional cost, but oftentimes they pay for themselves almost immediately. So I'm going to turn it back over to Lisa, and thank you for your time.
Great, thanks, Jeff. And thank you all for all your great questions today and for hanging with us as we ran a few minutes over. Just wanted to let you know about some of our upcoming webinars that you can sign up for. The next one is going to be Planning Your GP Upgrade, and that will be held on August the 10th. Also, a save the date for the GPUG Summit, which this year is in Tampa, Florida, October 11th through the 14th. If you are going, or someone in your organization is going, let your account managers know that, because we do try to set up some dinners and things for our clients who are at that event. And just a couple of promos that are going on right now. SalesPad, one of the things Jeff mentioned on his webinar today, currently 10% off through the end of the month through 7/29. And E1 Smart Connect is $1,000 off through 9/30. So if you're interested in either of those, there are some good promos going on right now. Just get with your account manager on those, and we can definitely make sure to include those if you're looking at either of those products. And lastly, we'll bring up the slide that has Jeff's information. If you do have additional questions, feel free to reach out. You can email or call Jeff at either of these numbers or email address. And I'm looking just to see if we have any additional questions really quickly. Doesn't look like it. So we thank everyone for your time, and again, we will send out today's webinar. It is recorded.